As Edwin takes him to the bedroom, he looks at the wooden tiger head above David's bed, carved to mimic his favorite toy, a plush tiger, appropriately named Tiger. This gets Edwin thinking of mimicking, and he gets an idea for a new project that could keep David entertained and free up time for him. It puts him 3 weeks behind Fazbear Entertainment's projects and makes him lose a lot of sleep, but he pours his heart and soul into his next creation. He couldn't afford supplies, so he used a lot of machinery and parts from the factory to create a primitive, legless endoskeleton. He stole hardware from some of his abandoned projects to create a computer for it, and programmed a thinking mind that would learn from mimicking what it observed. Edwin wrote the program at the speed of light, taking several shortcuts, but he was happy with the result. After 22 days of working on his son's new friend, it was finally done. Edwin showed off the endo to David, and he realized it might look frightening. Instead, David appears more curious, and asks his dad the creation's name. Edwin named the program Mimic 1, so he decided to call the endoskeleton the Mimic. It's worth noting that along with the lack of legs, this version of the character has novelty chattering teeth and pincher-like hands. Edwin reaches behind the Mimic's neck and presses its activation switch. Its eyes light up and its mouth opens and closes. David is startled. He hugs his tiger plushie to his chest, and the Mimic copies David by hugging a tiger-sized invisible object. He's delighted by the Mimic copying him, and refers to the Mimic as a he. Thanks to that, the Mimic is gendered as a male throughout this story. Edwin picks him up and takes him and David upstairs. The Mimic wraps its pinchers around Edwin's wrists. A primitive part of his brain fears the Mimic will clamp down and hurt him, but instead, his touch is gentle, even hesitant. Unlike the violent and murderous behavior I'm sure most of you are familiar with, initially, the Mimic is very kind and caring. After activating the Mimic, Edwin catches up on some sleep, and for the next 2 weeks, he works on Fazbear Entertainment's characters with long, uninterrupted work time. While Edwin hadn't given the Mimic a voice box, its muteness didn't seem to bother David. He developed a sort of sign language to communicate with him. This featured imitations of things he was trying to communicate, like eating ice cream. What the Mimic can do is somewhat limited, only being able to slowly copy David's movements. Over time, Edwin tinkered with the endoskeleton, allowing him to move smoother. He notes how quickly the Mimic is learning and starts brainstorming ideas for how he could apply the Mimic 1 program to many tasks. When Edwin completes the animatronic chicken he was working on, he finds David and the Mimic coloring together on the floor. The Mimic's drawing is messy, but to be fair, David's isn't much better. Later that day, Edwin sees the Mimic and David tossing a red rubber ball back and forth. Similar to drawing, neither of them are very good at it, but David was delighted by their clumsy games of catch. The Mimic went everywhere David did and copied his motions.